Hello everyone and welcome to my brand new office. Yeah, I have an office. Isn't that great? You know, the funny thing about being a homeowner instead of a renter is that you can do pretty much whatever the hell you want with the property. And I took the second bedroom and decided to turn it into my own personal little man cave slash office area. You can see my nerd shelf over here. Got all like a bunch of Star Wars memorabilia and all my 80s cartoon shit over there. But yeah. Fortunately, because the weather's been so awful, I've been kind of like stuck inside for the last couple of days. So all those videos I thought I wasn't going to be able to finish until February, I actually was able to knock them out. So you're going to get the next Kaiju Corner, which is going to focus on the Gamera series. And you're going to get my next Star Wars book review. So those have been filmed. They will probably be posted sometime tomorrow. So I got it in right under the wire. But yeah, I'm back on track to, back on schedule. And the move is done and everything. So I'm just happy to be in my new location. So I think this is going to be my permanent filming location moving forward. This is a nice office, probably going to decorate it a little bit, spruce it up a little. But this will probably be my permanent filming location moving forward. And this video is going to focus on the career of Mick Foley and highlight my top 10 favorite matches of his career. And I'm going to jump right into that, but first I want to talk about some current events that are going on, a couple of big headlines that have happened the last couple of days. For one thing, it's been announced that Dean Ambrose has asked for his release, and he will not be re-signed after WrestleMania. And earlier today, it was announced that Hideo Itami has been granted his release after requesting it. And now Kenta Kobayashi is free to go and do whatever he wants and continue his wrestling career. Both are very interesting losses for the WWE. Dean Ambrose, I'm not completely convinced that it's not a work. The fact that WWE released a statement talking about it makes me think that they're working us on that with that one. So we'll know more as the weeks and months go on, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were pulling a CM Punk here and just kind of working. But then again, the CM Punk thing was back in 2011 was steeped in a little bit of reality as well. So who knows? But again, as the weeks and months drone on, we'll know more. But yeah, it makes you wonder. It's like, all right, is AEW talking to people? Are they signing people? Or And that's one of the things that I think AEW, if they're going to be successful and they're going to want guys to jump ship over to their side. One thing that they can promise them is like, look, you get to create your own shit. We support entrepreneurialism here, and we're going to let you create your own characters and let you get over on your own. It's sink or swim, but it's going to be, if you sink or swim, it's going to be because of you, not because you're constantly being hamstringed by bad writing and bad creative. We are going to give you the ball and let you run with it. And I'm wondering if, maybe that's appealing to someone like Jon Moxley, who should be a raving psychopath instead of dressed up like Bane or the goofy babyface that he was a couple years ago. So I think it would be a very interesting loss. It is a big loss for WWE. I mean, he's not like one of their top tier stars, but he's like a high mid-card level former WWE champion level star. So that would be a big loss for them. And, him going to AEW, I'm only speculating at this point. Now, having AEW around, it kind of makes me go, oh, God, what kind of crazy shit is going to happen? It's going to be nuts. I'll tell you what, I just got a lot more excited for Double or Nothing. Let me tell you, it's like, God, if they get any, huge surprise debuts or anything, this is going to be insane. But Hideo Itami, that's one that doesn't surprise me because Kenta just didn't really ever click in the WWE, even in NXT. Not that he didn't have good matches. That wasn't necessarily the problem, but he kept getting hurt, very untimely injuries, and then he got moved to the main roster, and he's a cruiserweight, so he's just kind of going to be stuck on 205 Live without much to do. So he just kind of always felt like he was lacking direction and always getting hurt or something. It was just, there was always something getting in the way. So I can't really say WWE fucked him up. He just kind of, it was just a lot of bad luck more than anything else. But I also felt like WWE didn't want to let him go because they didn't want anybody else to have him. I'm convinced that Nakamura is going to stay there for as long as they can keep him because they don't want anyone else to have him. And I'm sure there are a few guys like that. Probably Kevin Owens is on that list as well. They don't want anybody else to have him. So they'll keep him for as long as they possibly can. But Hideo or Kenta, I guess we can start calling him Kenta again. I think he'll probably, if I had to guess, he's probably going to go back to Japan, I would think. And he'll, if he goes to New Japan, that's going to be a huge deal. Like, he's going to be, he'll go back to being a god over there if he goes to New Japan. So, again, we'll see. Again, it'll be very interesting to see how all of this plays out. So, I don't know how much AEW has to do with this or factors into this. I don't know exactly what's going on, but it is very interesting that, we've heard that the Revival's asked for their release. John Moxley supposedly is asking for his release. And now Hideo and Kenta. And it's very interesting. It's like, is AEW causing a stir right now? And the good thing, if AEW succeeds and it becomes like a legitimate number 2, if not WCW level, like close to it type of success, it'll give the wrestlers leverage again, which I think is very important. These guys need to, fight for what they're worth. And a lot of times they don't get to do that. They just kind of take whatever WWE offers them. And if they don't take it, or if, even worse, if Vince or someone in WWE doesn't like them, then they're just shit out of luck. You're fucked. It just doesn't matter. So it's, again, I'm just speculating that AEW has anything to do with this at all, but it'll be very interesting. Double or Nothing, man. I'm counting down the days. I think it's going to be really exciting. So, fingers crossed, and here's hoping for something special. But with that, let me go into my top 10 of the month. My top 10 favorite matches of Mick Foley's career. Now, people who know me know that I'm a big fan of Mick Foley because, not that I'm the biggest fan of hardcore wrestling. I do enjoy it, but not always my cup of tea. But Foley could do it really well because Foley was a storyteller and could actually tell stories with the hardcore wrestling. But I think for me, the major appeal of someone like a Mick Foley was that he represented, the down on their luck schmucks of the world. Like, he was not the best looking guy, not the most athletic guy, but he tried harder than everybody else. He put more effort than anybody else, and he could talk better than anybody. Like, Foley might be my favorite mic worker of all time because he could get you to laugh, cry. He could scare you. I mean, he could do it all on the mic. There was nothing that Foley couldn't do. One of the best natural performers in the history of wrestling on the microphone. Foley was second to none. He was just able to bring about so many emotions in me and all the other fans that it was impossible not to love him. He was awesome. And when he played a psychotic maniac, you loved him for it. When he was a happy-go-lucky idiot, you loved him for it. I think back on the funniest moments in wrestling history, and Foley's got like so many of them, with Mr. Sacco and all that whole thing with Vince in the hospital. So many great stuff. The Rock and Sock Connection stuff, their interactions were great. I mean, Foley offered so much, and I think the real proof in the pudding with Foley is the fact that he had so many distinct personalities that he could play. Dude Love, which he was great at, which actually had like a nice like character moment for Foley where, he created the character of Dude Love in this amateur video, and then all of a sudden it becomes his gimmick on WWF television, and they painted it like it was the dream come true for Mick Foley. I was like, that's actually kind of a nice story, and it explains why he's acting like this weird kind of hippie guy. It's like, if he just randomly did that, it wouldn't make any sense, but they gave it backstory and meaning, so it actually, you felt good for Foley that he had finally found himself able to play Dude Love, and I'm like, oh man, that's great. That's terrific, but Cactus Jack, his most famous persona, which is the crazy hardcore freak of nature, a monster that would do anything to himself or his opponents, kind of the king of hardcore, Cactus Jack. One of the greatest names in wrestling, too. I love that name, Cactus Jack. It's perfect. And that's why the Wanted poster logo is so perfect for that character, because it sounds like something out of a Western. So many great little things with the different Foley characters. And my personal favorite as a character that he had, though, was Mankind. The raving, masked psychopath was something that could have easily been stupid and could have easily failed. But again, you put the right performer in the role and it makes magic. The Mankind character, from the early days when he was, feuding with The Undertaker to his tag team, or trying to become tag team partners with Steve Austin, all of that stuff. And in the sillier years, like in 98 and 99, where he became more of a comedy act, all of that stuff was fantastic. And I love the Mankind character because to me it embodied everything that I love about Mick Foley. He could be funny, he could be scary, and everything in between. It was just... and also, I just love I remember when he did the Mandible Claw for the first time. I think it was, if memory serves me right, it was against Henry Godwinn on an episode of Raw when he did the Mandible Claw for the first time. And it weirded me out so much. I was like, what the fuck is that? And there were a lot of things with the Mankind character where I was like, what the fuck is that? But that made him more interesting and just got him over even more as a character. Why does he have why does he have an entrance theme and an exit theme? I don't know. But man, I could sit here all day and talk about great Mick Foley moments, but I'm here to talk about the great matches. So without further ado, let's just dive right into it. My personal favorite Mick Foley matches of all time, the top 10. Let's get started. I bet you weren't expecting to see the Nasty Boys show up on this list, but it turns out they were a pretty important part of Foley's career. At Spring Stampede 1994, Cactus Jack would team up with Max Payne to take on the Nasty Boys in a Chicago street fight that was Falls Count Anywhere. And, Cactus would have a few wild matches with the Nasty Boys. He would actually defeat the Nasty Boys with Kevin Sullivan to become the WCW Tag Team Champions at Slamboree later that year. Another wild and crazy match, and important for being Foley's only WCW championship that he would ever win. But the types of matches that these guys had together were so wild and crazy that they really set the stage for basically ECW's entire tag team division and all the wild brawls and hardcore matches that you would see during the Monday Night Wars period, a style that would basically become the norm. So if you like these type of matches, these wild, free-for-all, Falls Count Anywhere type of affairs, they can really be traced back to matches like this. And I think personally, of all the times that Foley and Max Payne cross paths with the Nasty Boys, this is my personal favorite match that they had together. Max Payne is kind of an interesting figure. He was a big man. I guess you could say a mountain of a man. A mountain made of rock. He was just a very interesting partner for Cactus Jack, and they actually complemented each other really well. But in any case, I thought all four of these guys meshed really, really well in these wild brawls that they had, and the one at Spring Stampede I think is their personal best. No best of Mick Foley list is complete without mentioning Terry Funk, a man who was closely tied to Cactus Jack and Mick Foley throughout the 90s. And if I'm going to talk about Mick Foley's career, I have to bring up the Funker. And I could have gone several different ways with this. I could have brought up the times they were partners. I could have brought up the times they were enemies in various companies, WWF, ECW. But really, if I wanted to go to Mick Foley and Terry Funk at their most purely true to themselves, I had to go to the King of Deathmatch tournament from 1995 for IWA Japan. A match that gained a lot of notoriety after the release of Foley's first book, Have a Nice Day, where he went into great detail about the match. And highlights from the match were also used in a few WWF video packages. I believe it was used on the I Quit match video package right before Mankind vs. The Rock at Royal Rumble 99. But it is such a violent spectacle that if you're into that type of thing, I highly recommend checking it out, because you won't find too many death matches that are better than that. Very violent. You had barbed wire ropes, barbed wire boards. The barbed wire boards were wired with C4 to explode, and then at the 10-minute mark, the ring was supposed to explode. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute, but, when you look at the blood that these guys lost and the scars that they got and all the times they fell into the barbed wire and the explosions causing the burns and everything, it was a wild spectacle, and the type of match that I look at and go, there's not enough money on this planet that you could pay me to get me to do something like that. And apparently Foley got paid $300 to do it. It's like, man, that's insane. Now, famously, this is also a match where there were a couple of mistakes made. For one thing, the big high spot, which is supposed to be the ring blowing up at the 10-minute mark, kind of petered out. It didn't work the way it was supposed to. And Cactus and Terry were able to turn it around and save it. So that could have easily turned into a disaster of like Hogan Warrior at Halloween Havoc 98 proportions, but they were able to save it and get the match back on track. And they worked in that ladder spot where Terry knocked Cactus off the ladder and he fell into the barbed wire, which is sick as all hell. The match also ends with a little bit of an anticlimax as Terry was unable to continue, so Cactus just kind of pinned him. But I think this was a case of where the two guys just beat the ever-living hell out of each other to such a degree. I mean, look at Foley's crimson mask on this. It doesn't even look like blood. It looks like face paint at some point. Like, it was just caked onto his face, and it just looked really, really nasty. And this match is not for the faint of heart, but if you're into this type of stuff, it's definitely worth checking. I've said before on a few occasions that one of the reasons I didn't abandon the WWF in 1996 when the NWO became red hot was because I really liked the Undertaker-Mankind feud. The storyline and the brawls that they would have with each other and all the different segments they did on TV made Raw at least worth checking out during a period where they didn't have a whole lot to offer, where WCW was just destroying them. But the Undertaker-Mankind feud was awesome, and I loved it. And my personal favorite match that they had with each other in 1996 was the Buried Alive match, which was kind of the culmination. I know they would have another match at Survivor Series, but really, I mean, this to me was kind of the climax of the whole thing. And I thought for a match gimmick that could have easily been stupid and could have easily turned into a disaster and a fiasco and one of the worst matches ever, I thought it was a great match. I thought it was a very exciting, well-worked match that complemented both characters very well and represented what Foley and Undertaker could do with each other at their very best, both from a character standpoint and a work rate standpoint. I thought this was an excellent match. And you also got that memorable ending with all the heels attacking Undertaker and burying him in the grave, and Undertaker's hand coming up out of the grave, which is one of those like spectacular theatrical moments and one of those great classic Undertaker highlights. But for the best representation of the Undertaker-Mankind feud, look no further than Buried Alive 1996. I think it's a great one. Surprise, surprise again, Dude Love actually made the list, but trust me when I say this is the best match that Mick Foley had as Dude Love. And this match is so significant for a few reasons. It was, to me, the template for the Attitude Era main event, with all the gaga and the special guest referee trying to screw over the babyface and the brawling all over the place and, you know, the rules changing on a dime and just this constant chaotic atmosphere. It really exemplified the type of matches that the Attitude Era would offer, especially at the main event level. And in this situation, the Austin McMahon situation is at a fever pitch, with McMahon making himself the guest referee, Gerald Briscoe the guest timekeeper, Pat Patterson the guest ring announcer, and Austin's way of countering that is that he was able to, through ways that I'm not even going to bother explaining because we'll be here all day, he was able to make it so that The Undertaker could be the guest enforcer to ensure that McMahon called the match fair and square. And Dude Love at this point was the chosen one, the corporate butt-kissing champion that had been handpicked by McMahon to dethrone Austin. And you combine all those elements together, and it sounds like it almost turned into a mess. Look to WrestleMania 2000's main event for an example of having too many components around and it just creating this confusing and somewhat lackluster affair. But here, everything kind of complemented each other, and everything just played into the anticipation and the growing drama and just the wild and chaotic nature of the whole thing. And it really starts beautifully with Pat Patterson's introductions, which are amazing. I highly recommend you go watch this match, if for no other reason to watch Pat Patterson introduce everybody. It's flipping great and really added to the anticipation for the main event. But once Austin and Foley get underway, you had McMahon changing the rules as he goes, making it a no DQ match, making it a false count anywhere match, just on a dime. And that type of unpredictability and ever-changing nature of the match made it like a guessing game. You didn't know how Austin was going to survive, if he was going to survive, and what else McMahon was going to do to screw him over. And the end result was one of the most exciting matches of the Attitude Era, I think. When I think back on the Attitude Era and I think of like the best examples of their exciting main events, this one is near the top of the list, especially as a representation of what Foley could do and as a representation of just how hot the Austin McMahon feud was at the time in 1998. It was a great time to be a fan. Next up was a match that Foley himself described as the best match of his career up to this point, and that was his Falls Count Anywhere match with Sting at WCW's Beach Blast 1992. And this was a big match for Foley. Even though the title wasn't on the line, Sting was the WCW World Champion. So him being in the ring on a pay-per-view with the World Champion, that's a pretty big deal. And with that extra spotlight, I think Foley kind of put a little bit more effort into this match. Not that he didn't always give 110%, but maybe here he put 120. And when you look at some of the flips and dives that were done throughout the course of the match, on concrete no less. He did that sunset flip spot that he would do. He did that onto concrete, and Sting had some bad falls too, and they did some crazy stuff with the security railing, and it's a wild, wild match. And at the time, it was something that was almost foreign to me. Like, I couldn't imagine matches being like that as a kid. So to see something like that just completely blew my mind. And it really raised the stock of Cactus Jack in my eyes, that he could go out there and have such a cool match with someone as cool as I thought Sting was. So really, it's one of those situations where both guys brought their A game and both guys came out better and more over for it. At number 5, we have a tie. Yeah, I'm kind of cheating here, but to me, both of these matches kind of represent the same thing, so I counted them together. And what they represent is a return to form for Mick Foley post-retirement. After retiring in 2000, Foley would go on to make sporadic appearances for the WWF, but wouldn't get back into the ring until 2004, most famously at WrestleMania 20, where he tagged with The Rock against Evolution. But his real return to form came at the very next pay-per-view, Backlash, where he faced his rival, Randy Orton, in a wild and crazy hardcore match that was brutal, and I would go as far to say the best match of Randy Orton's career, even at this point. Not saying that Randy's incapable, I'm just saying is like this match was just really, really friggin' good. And then in 2006, Foley would go on to have the best WrestleMania match of his career with Edge in a crazy hardcore match that would involve flaming tables, thumbtacks, barbed wire, and everything else. Now, if you had to twist my arm, I would probably say the match with Edge was the better match and had the better finish for sure, with the flaming table spot serving as the final blow to take Foley down. But the Orton feud was so great and so well built and such a beautifully told story all the way through that any of my minor misgivings with the match, like teasing fire and not delivering on it, and minor things like that, I kind of overlook it because the overall product and the overall storyline was great. So the Orton feud was a much better storyline than the Edge one, which kind of felt like a rehash. But with the grand stage and the glitz and glamour of WrestleMania, to see such a crazy hardcore match with thumbtacks, barbed wire, and a flaming table was almost surreal. You couldn't even imagine it, and having Joey Styles on commentary definitely helped add to the whole picture. So, there's certain aspects I like about the Orton match more, and there's certain aspects I like about the Edge match more. So it's hard to pick a favorite, so I made it a tie. But in any case, both matches proved that at this stage, Foley could still go when called upon, and was still the king of hardcore. It's time to spin the wheel and make the deal as we look back at Cactus Jack's famous Texas death match with Big Van Vader from Halloween Havoc 1993. Now, this series of matches was one of the first ones I remember watching where I started to appreciate the more savage and violent nature of professional wrestling. It really started with that famous match they had on WCW Worldwide where Cactus Jack got powerbombed outside the ring. And yes, the ensuing amnesia angle was a little silly, but overall I really enjoyed the feud and I really enjoyed the matches that these two had together. Of course, these two would also have a match where Mick Foley famously lost an ear in Germany. So that kind of paints the picture of just how violent some of these matches got. They were pretty brutal and pretty sick. I also recommend checking out their WCW Saturday Night match where Vader just beat the tar out of Cactus, and like the punches he was giving him just looked friggin' real. It was really a sick match as well. But the Halloween Havoc match in particular really sticks out to me because up to that point I would say it was the most violent match I had ever seen in professional wrestling. And I enjoyed it. I didn't shy away from it, and I wasn't grossed out by it or anything like that. So maybe it's an early indication that I was a sociopath. Who knows? I don't know. But I did enjoy the match, and I was like blown away by just how violent it got. Now, has the match been surpassed in terms of like the level of brutality and violence since then? Sure, absolutely. But at the time, it was like an important stepping stone for me. It's like, testing my limits. All right, how far can I stand and still enjoy this. And I did enjoy this match a lot. I thought it was Foley's best match from WCW, and probably the best indicator of what Foley was all about during his WCW tenure. So I thought this match was great. I thought these two had wonderful chemistry with each other, and they yielded some pretty violent matches. Next up is a match that Foley himself would say is the best match of his career. And that was his main event match with WWF champion Shawn Michaels at In Your House Mind Games 1996. And yeah, this was a big match for Foley. He's getting a main event spot against the World Heavyweight Champion with the title on the line. That's friggin' great. And it really felt like the character and the talent were being rewarded. He'd already had the series of matches with Undertaker, won all their pay-per-view encounters, and had gotten over and was a believable threat to Undertaker. And if this mutilated, psychotic freak could go toe-to-toe with The Undertaker, then, oh my God, Michaels is in for hell. I mean, this is going to be terrible for him. And Michaels was this young, athletic, good-looking babyface champion, and you put him up against this psychotic freak of nature, and it's like, oh my God, this is going to make magic. And I love it when you have two different characters and two different styles clashing with each other, because it typically makes magic, and they definitely made magic here. And there are a lot of subtle things that they did in this match that I thought were great. That really painted the picture that Shawn had to go to the extreme to really take this dude out. I think back to Shawn like stomping on the mandible claw hand, so Foley couldn't use the mandible claw. I think back to Foley injuring his leg, and then to get circulation back in the knee, he started jamming a pen into his knee, which I have never seen that in a match before or since. At least I don't think so. And it was such a weird, like, character moment for Mankind that it's the little things that help characters stick out to me more, and that was one of those weird moments that really helped stick out to me. The announce table came into play. They had some scary falls, and again, Michaels felt like he had to turn up the violence to match toe-to-toe with someone like Mankind. And it made for a stupendous main event that was probably the best of Shawn's title reign in 96. Why is it not number one on this list? The finish. Unfortunately, because Shawn was going to be dropping the title at Survivor Series, the original plan was Vader, ultimately ended up being Psycho Sid, but Shawn was set to drop the title at Survivor Series, win it back at the Royal Rumble. This match was kind of an in-betweener just to give Shawn something to do, and Mankind was still feuding with Undertaker, and they still had needed to have their Buried Alive match, which was actually being promoted on this show. So this felt like more of a roadblock for both guys rather than a raging climax, and because of that, the finish was a DQ. And that's unfortunate, because you give this match a better finish, and it's probably one of the top 10 best matches in company history. The DQ finish does take away from it a little bit, but it really makes me wish they had revisited this feud and done something more with it, because like, man, I can't help but think of what Shawn and Foley could have done with each other on a bigger stage with a bigger build-up and a more definitive climactic finish. Instead, this felt like it was a preview of some greatness that was to come that we unfortunately never got. But in any case, I thought this was a stupendous match, one of the best performances of Foley's career, and one of the best WWF matches of 1996 for sure. And this match is one that I bet Foley isn't very fond of, and that was his I Quit match with The Rock from Royal Rumble 1999. Foley and Rock were in the middle of their huge rivalry at this point, and I think we all kind of knew that it was going to be Rock and Austin at Mania, and Foley was just kind of giving Rock something to do to build him up and get him ready for Austin at WrestleMania. But Foley had gotten so over at this point, and the rivalry had gotten so over that it felt appropriate for Foley to ultimately defeat Rock for the title in that famous moment of Monday Night Raw history, which is my personal favorite moment in the history of Monday Night Raw, when Foley won the title from Rock. And these two had amazing chemistry with each other. We all know about the Rock and Sock connection, but as opponents, again, kind of like what I talked about with Shawn, they were so different from each other and such polar opposites that you put them together and it just made pure and utter magic. And every time they faced each other, even if it was just on the microphone, their interactions were just golden. And even the video package for this match, which you can see on the WWE Network, so check it out. The video package hyping this match is probably my favorite video package that WWE ever did, with so many great quotes and clips from Foley and Rock, and it's edited together so beautifully that it's like, oh man, this felt like it should have won an Emmy or something. It's that good. Like, I really loved that video, and me and some of my wrestling fan friends, we still quote that video to this day. It's flipping great. But the match itself was one of the most violent and brutal matches of Foley's career, famously for the ending where The Rock he'd handcuffed Foley and was wailing on him again and again and again with a steel chair. And it was a great dramatic story, for sure, where I was screaming for the match to be stopped. And, those of you who watched Beyond the Mat, you got to see Foley's wife and kids, brought to tears during the whole thing. And, even Michael Cole on commentary. I thought Michael Cole, this is the closest he ever came to capturing a Jim Ross-like performance, begging Foley to say, "I quit," just so the suffering would be over. Very great dramatic moment, and everything kind of built into that with the handcuffs and Foley getting knocked off the scaffold there and hitting the electrical board and getting caught in that whole mess. Really, it was just another example of the type of babyface that Foley was, where he was this plucky, never say die, type of character, and it was perfect up against this cocky, arrogant asshole, The Rock. And I think both characters were captured perfectly in that finish, even though it was brutal and it's hard to watch. And, the whole talk of concussions and chair shots to the head and everything, it makes this match a lot more controversial today. But as far as the story goes, I thought it was a very well-told story and made both characters stronger by the time it was over. In addition to just being an amazingly violent spectacle. Just a crazy, crazy match. And one thing I want to say, this was an I Quit match, and I think back to Bret Hart and Bob Backlund at WrestleMania 11 and the I Quit match they had, where the microphone seemed to get in the way of the story, with Piper constantly shouting into it, and Bob Backlund not saying I quit into the microphone for the finish, and various other things. The microphone almost seemed like a hindrance, but with Cactus, I keep calling him Cactus, but Mankind and Rock, it actually enhanced the story, with Rock getting his bits in, and Foley, whenever Rock would hit him with steel chair, and Foley would say something like, "Go to hell, Rock," or "You'll have to kill me," which was very chilling, by the way. I felt like the microphone really enhanced the thing, and Rock even screaming for Foley to say "I quit" was also great. That type of stuff. Actually, I remember the next day people were arguing. It's like, oh, Rock should have lost the match because he said "I quit" into the microphone. And I was like, I'm surprised they didn't bring that up on TV. But again, I bought it because Rock's technically not quitting, and I think the referee's smart enough to know that. So, but in any case, a lot has been said about this match. But as highlighting it as one of the best told stories of Foley's career, I think it's definitely worth a look, and one of the most memorable matches I've ever seen. Now, before I go into the number one pick, let me talk about some honorable mentions that almost made the list and were strongly considered by me, but ultimately I decided to leave them off for one reason or another. Some of these matches include a match that doesn't get talked about a lot, but one that really sticks with me, and that was Mankind defending the WWF Tag Team titles against the New Age Outlaws at SummerSlam 1998 in a no DQ match. Not the most glamorous match, but one that was essential in getting Foley over as an underdog babyface and getting sympathy on him as a character. Again, it's not the most glamorous match in the world. It's not going to get very high star ratings, but I think it was essential for Foley's career and his ultimate push as a babyface to give him a match like that. And it's one of the, when I think back on Foley's career, it's one of the matches that really sticks out to me as one that really got me to love him even more as a character. There's also Mankind's match against The Rock from Raw 1999, where he won the title. I've called it my favorite moment in Raw history. It's probably my favorite moment in Foley's career. I'd say it definitely is my favorite moment of Foley's career. As a match, though, it's just kind of, it's a means to an end. It's just a lot of gaga and a lot of craziness just to get to the moment. It's not like the best in-ring story ever told. It's just all about getting to that title change. And that's fine, and that's entertaining, and I loved it. But when I think about complete stories told in the ring, I think Foley had much better ones. But that was definitely the best moment of his career, for sure. Another one, a couple matches with Undertaker, the famous Boiler Room Brawl from SummerSlam 1996. One that was ahead of its time, and one of those brawls that was very influential on the hardcore matches and those type of things that you would see down the road a couple years later. I don't think it's aged as well as some other ones. Maybe not as much as, say, the Hollywood Backlot Brawl from WrestleMania 12, which I think surprisingly holds up fairly well for the most part, outside of the White Bronco stuff, but that's neither here nor there. The Boiler Room Brawl maybe dragged a little too long, and commentary being quiet for most of it is a little weird, but it is really well shot and well executed from that aspect, and Paul Bearer's heel turn was a huge moment in the careers of everybody involved. So, and once again, you get to see Undertaker and Mankind do their thing and be crazy and off the wall and insane. So, for that, it worked. Another more famous match that these two had was the Hell in a Cell match at King of the Ring 1998. The most famous match of Foley's career, without question. And again, it's a match that I've watched a ton of times, but not for the story. I don't think it's a very well-told in-ring story. But if you want an example of just how crazy Mick Foley could be, the fact that he would willingly get thrown off the cell, then climb back up the cell and get slammed through it, and then continue and finish the match, a match that included a thumbtack spot, by the way, you really do see, like, I said earlier that Cactus always gave 110%. This was a night where he gave like 160% and went above and beyond the Call of Duty or any kind of reasonable expectations of any performer ever. So if you want, even though it's not my favorite in-ring story ever told, if you want an example of what Mick Foley was all about, that match pretty much captures it completely. You'd also be good to look into some of Foley's matches with Triple H. He had some really good matches with Triple H, including one of my more favorite matches in Raw history, their Falls Count Anywhere match in 1997, where Foley famously did the Three Faces of Foley bit where Dude Love, Cactus Jack, and Mankind were all interacting and talking to each other, which was surreal in of itself, but a very cool moment. And it was Cactus Jack's WWE debut, or I should say Foley's first time playing Cactus Jack in the WWE. And his match with Hunter S. Helmsley I thought was very exciting, very good. It made for a great moment for a very strong year of Monday Night Raw in 1997. Triple H and Cactus Jack would go on to have a few more matches with each other. Actually, the match that would lead to Foley's retirement was the Hell in a Cell match at No Way Out 2000, which is one of the saddest endings I've ever seen to a wrestling match ever when Foley lost. Even though I kind of knew he was going to lose, I was still very upset when it happened. And again, one of those great, Foley tugging at the heartstring type of moments, and also a wild and violent match as well. But that said, I thought that Cactus Jack and Triple H had a much better match, which I will cover right now. And here it is, my favorite match of Mick Foley's career, his classic showdown with Triple H, the street fight for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship from Royal Rumble 2000. And yeah, everything that led into this match was just golden, with Triple H becoming an even stronger heel than he was before. You know, he had married Stephanie at that point on TV, and the heat for them was just rising day by day, and the stuff they did to Foley just really made us not only want Foley to beat him, but beat the ever-living dog crap out of him. We wanted Foley to just completely brutalize and bloody and massacre Triple H, and that's what we got in this match. We got the return of Cactus Jack, which is one of the best segments from this era, I think. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's great, where Mankind takes the mask off and comes back as Cactus Jack, rips the shirt off, and he's got the Cactus Jack Wanted poster underneath. And Triple H's reaction, he sold it perfectly. It was just a wonderful moment. And it all fed into this match, which was a violent spectacle, to say the least, with Cactus pretty much obliterating Triple H using a barbed wire 2x4. Triple H at one point actually got, I think, like a giant splinter in his leg, so he had this huge gash in his leg that looked nasty. They were bleeding everywhere. Thumbtacks came into play. Actually, Cactus would ultimately lose to a pedigree in the thumbtacks, which, again, on the list of things you couldn't pay me to do, going face first into a pile of thumbtacks is not, it's pretty high on that list of things you couldn't pay me to do. But I think that the real gritty, fight-like nature of this match really not only made it a violent spectacle, but also made it feel larger than life and like a classic all-time showdown. And yeah, to this day, I still look back on that as one of the best matches of Triple H's career. I think it's number one on this list. It's my favorite match of Foley's career, and just an outstanding display and a perfect example of what happens when you get two talents at the top of their game, just doing what makes them stars, and you have a great heel and a great babyface. And when you got all those elements combined to make a wrestling story, it typically works out pretty well. It worked fabulously well here. Excellent, excellent match that, not only was a highlight for Foley's career, but I think was very important in getting Triple H. If he wasn't already firmly established as a main eventer, this one kind of like super glued him onto that. And it's like, all right, Triple H he's a star. Like, there's no debating it. He is absolutely a star after something like this. So, yeah, I love this match. It's great. And, yeah, go check it out if you haven't seen it.